We're in a very unstable climate right now. And because of that, it's causing corporate spending pullbacks. And that is particularly dangerous for entrepreneurs that more than 20% of their revenue is generated from a single source, a corporate source, that right now is showing all indications of pullback. From a profitability perspective, you want to do loss prevention, which normally is used to describe a retail shop trying to stop somebody from stealing merchandise off their rocks. But in this context, I'm talking about like, how do we stop losing clients? So you want to protect and preserve what you already have. And one of the things you want to do that with is really establishing a high value to cost ratio. So having frequent meetings or reports that go to the decision maker that says, here's the cost, here's the value of what you're getting from that cost. So this justifies, so you're keeping a very high value to cost ratio. Yeah. Is really important.
It's interesting because a lot of the new features in things like Google Analytics or Data Studio, which is now Looker Studio, allows you to like pull in those metrics from a lot of different places into a report that it allows it to be a lot easier to be able to see from a marketing perspective, but from a lot of different perspectives. I mean, you can pull in stuff from your CRM to see how many discovery calls you had, how many, you can pull in all of this data that can really set up like a business KPI dashboard for you that's automated. So you're not having a person who's just in charge of populating a spreadsheet all the time.
And I think when you get that data, it's not enough just to have the dashboard. You have to turn around and have a real high touch experience to those decision makers, because that's where you're going to detect in those conversations where they are in their risk tolerance. So if they're starting to trend to a pullback, you want to be in front of them as much as possible, because you're saying, I'm a vital piece. I'm not some nameless, faceless person, provider behind this that I can lob off really easily. You want them to have to face you to contract. Your other thing should be
able to explain what those things mean. Like you had 15 discovery calls and you only had 3 closed proposals, and so where do we need to adjust in this area? Or you had 500 visits to this blog post and no phone calls from it, and so maybe what we need to do is have an intermediate step in between people wanting to consume this information versus people wanting to pick up the phone. Maybe that's that they need a workbook to lead them through the next steps, and then say, okay, now I have this, now I can give them a call, or now I can book that discovery call or whatever.
Yeah, you're refining the process, and you have to do it without overturning the apple cart, right? Like you want to tweak. You don't want to slash and burn, because if you slash and burn, you can't tell what created the impact because all of it went into it. So it's like a doctor that you have symptoms of something, and a doctor prescribes you 3 new medications and pulled you off 3 other medications, and you end up with an allergic reaction, and you go, okay, I ended up with an allergic reaction. I didn't have it before, so we can at least isolate it to whatever the new drugs are, but I took 3. Now I don't know which one caused the problem, right? And because I axed out the other 3, the only answer to this is to cut all 3 and slowly add 1 back in at a time. And it's sloppy, and it causes leaks and gaps, and it's really you don't want to do that. Fast is not always better. Slow and methodical on something to determine what you're doing. And in the end, sometimes we forget that you just need to change targets. There's nothing wrong with the offering. The target's under pressure. So you need to pick another target to market to. There's just so many dynamics to what's causing the problem, and I know everybody wants a quick fix solution, but they don't exist. So they don't exist. So staying in front of them to manage risk tolerance, and I would say always have a fallback plan. If the client starts to show signs of this isn't working or we're overextended, that you give them a fallback of, well, let's wean off. So let's cut me down to 50%. Again, from that lens of loss prevention, something is better than nothing. So backing them down far enough and then checking in. So like I had a client go through this where first the client was like, first my client's client was like, I want a 2-year contract. I don't want to renegotiate this every year. Great. That was the first time we saw some inkling after COVID that somebody was willing to do a long-term contract. We were really excited. They signed it. Then apparently they forgot that they had signed a 2-year contract because they message about 6 months later, they message my client and say, well, we're on our 1 year, we're coming up on the 1 year and we only want to go by 6 months. And she's like, she said to me, do you think they forgot they signed a 2-year contract? I'm like, well, clearly. And then it was, oh, let's pull back. So then she addressed it with them and said, where would you like to cut? Where do you feel like your company can pull us back from? And they ended up going, okay, so never mind. We're not going to expand, but we'll do this. We'll leave it, but we're only going to leave it for 6 months. And then she was like, okay. And so she met them where they were at. And then 6 months later, like, okay, we're good for the end of the year. And so what we realized was they're going to end up at that 2-year mark, but she has to re-enter that sales cycle every 6 months because she has to stay tolerating their risk, like what they can tolerate in their risk, which is no more than 6 months. That's their comfort zone. And there's a real risk because this is going to come up at the end of the year when we're in such an unstable environment that she could lose them at the end of the year. So there's just certain games you get to play on making sure they're not the only pea in the pod, right? They're not the only basket we're holding eggs in, because if they wean off and we're already seeing a reactionary behavior from them, that's giving us a red flag that we could lose this client. So it's about repositioning and making sure enough new business is coming in to offset the risk of that one. So yeah,
and also, like, I'm sure you could speak to kind of the other side of this weird time that we're in, where you get a client who is really well connected, but yet they're going way outside your boundaries for how you like to work. So for instance, in my family, we've made a big effort to have like no cell phones from 5 to 8 because that's family time on the weekends, as much as we can, protect our weekends so that we can spend time with the family. And as an entrepreneur, it's, as you know, very difficult to be able to kind of hold those boundaries. And so when you get a client and you're hoping that they're well connected, this is going to lead to more business, and you want to be this high touch person and demonstrate that value that you're talking about, but then at the same time you want to be able to maintain your own work-life balance for your own sanity and mental health. Where are the lines? What should you be paying attention to when you run into a situation like that?
I look at it like from a 2-point perspective, and I mean, maybe you have other ways that you're dealing with it. I look at it as like a 2-point perspective. One, it's like the teenager throwing a fit over boundaries, but in the end, they actually secretly crave the boundaries because the boundaries help them feel contained. So one of the things I notice is people who are not having healthy boundaries, like clients who are not having healthy boundaries, are typically in a chaos state. So they're feeling very out of control. So by simply me putting a boundary up, they might fight at it in the beginning, but in the end, it helps them feel contained and safe, if that makes sense. Like, oh, there's a container. I can bounce around in here, but I'm contained enough that I'm safe. So there's that aspect of it. The other aspect of it, okay, well, there's 3 things then, I guess, is if you're going to treat me like this, like hangs out with like. So do I really want your referrals? Because the people you're going to refer to me are also going to be boundary pushing, and that's not something that I want to do. So the way I cope with it is a couple of ways. One, I ended up writing into my proposals a VIP package that says, do you want me on demand? Then you're going to pay this price tag. So, and I got it, Gwen, from your yes if lesson. Yeah. Yes, you can get me at 6 o'clock when we're away from the phones. If you pay me, if we're on a minimum of a $5,000 or $6,000 retainer per month. Yeah. Or you can sign on for this. You can interrupt my space one time a month outside of hours, and you're going to pay this price tag for that. After that, I don't respond. And so I blend it. Like, just so you know, from 5 to 8, our family has the commitment that we're not on our phones. So it won't matter if you reach out to me in a 911. I won't see it because I'm disconnected.
Don't have my phone with me.
Right. And I'm not ignoring your needs. I am paying attention to the needs of my family. And I think that's a really important reframe. I'm not looking at it and going, I'm ignoring you, because that can be triggering. You're saying, I'm paying attention over here. And so you're showing them what you are paying attention to versus telling them I'm not paying attention to you. So there's that piece is yes, if. Yes, you can get to me if, and within these parameters. So within these guidelines.
But also thinking about, we were having a conversation earlier about somebody who is working with someone who is very like frantic, in that chaos state that you had mentioned. Yeah. And they're, how do you measure really that social capital of, seeing, is this boundary pushing not only monetarily worth it, but is it also worth it in the long run to be able to see, is the juice really going to be worth the squeeze? Or what boundaries do you put in place for yourself to be like, okay, we're doing this for 6 months, and if I get nothing from it, or I'm doing this for a year, like,
yeah. You know what's really interesting? Because I am a behavioral profiler, you have to be careful, because you go, yes, I like that. And I used to say, okay, 90 days. We'll give you 90 days to see if we can't calm you down. The challenge that I found is that in that 90 days, we're training them how to treat us. So if at the 90-day mark, you say, okay, this is now no longer worth it, or the 6-month mark, you go, now, they're like, wait, what happened? Like, you didn't say anything before. So I think it's okay to do that, but you have to choose, as Brene Brown says, you have to choose discomfort over resentment. So instead of resenting them for crossing the boundaries, you have to have the uncomfortable conversation to say, listen, it sounds to me like all this is very chaotic right now, and it's very destabilizing, and you don't really know where you land in all this. It's way outside scope. This is not how I normally do business. I'm willing to give this 90 days to see if we can calm everything down and get back to the way we tend to do business. With the caveat that after 90 days, if we can't calm this down, then we have to have another discussion as to whether or not we're a fit for you. And then you have 90 days to find a way to replace that income.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you've called it out, so it doesn't blindside them, right? You don't go, what? You just go, hey. And then, when you're doing your monthly check-ins, to go, here's all the conversations we had within scope and within boundaries, and here's everything we had without. And then give the positive reinforcement if in the first 30 days they went outside of boundaries 16 times, and in the next 30 days they only did it 8 times. You're like, look, we're getting better. See, we're going in the right direction. We're going to get
using positive reinforcement.
Correct. Yeah, correct. 100%. And I think if you frame it not about you, but you make it about them, that's the other thing, is you say, listen, I'm holding this boundary, and it's in your best interest that I hold this boundary, because if I'm exhausted, if I'm resentful, if I have other stuff going on in my life because I'm ignoring my other commitments, I'm not showing up for you in the way that I should be. And so it actually benefits you, client, that I hold these boundaries, because then when I'm with you, I am with you. I am focused. I am not exhausted. The team is well organized. If I need to tap the team for something, I'm not now violating their boundaries. And one of the things that I don't know if everybody in the US is aware of this, but there's some movements, and this has occurred in Australia, and this just got passed. I don't know, I can't remember what country. I want to say it may have been the UK, or one of our states passed it. I think California is about to pass it, which is employees are actually legally protected from being contacted by their employers in any way, shape, or form outside of working hours. And it's sad that we actually have to get a law for that.
That's exciting.
There's an actual law in Australia. And so when this law came up, I want to say it is California, a Californian who's got a friend in Australia said, hey, this is up on a ballot, like this is coming up, like what kind of impact did this have in Australia? And do you want to know what the response from the Australian was it didn't make much of a difference for us because we're not crazy like you guys are. We don't, our employers didn't violate our boundaries in the first place.
The meme that goes around where it's like, oh, Europeans, the rest of the world is like, oh, I'm going to take 3 weeks off to recharge and relax. And then Americans are like, I'm going to take 3 days off while I recover from heart surgery, and then I will be back online from my bed.
Yeah. And they said that. They're like, we surf in the morning, we're going out to eat at night. We leave our phones at home. So even if the employer reached out, they're not going to get us because we're surfing or we're out to dinner. Like we're not around. And so it was just a very interesting concept of that. So, I mean, in the end, as this becomes more and more visible, it will be impossible for us to actually contact our team outside of those hours to put out a fire. And oftentimes it's not really a fire. It's a fire in their mind.
It's a perceived fire. And I think that that's the important part about setting a boundary is like before they send that message, they're like, oh, well, I did this for a client last night. I was like, oh, I wanted to work on this project. And then, I couldn't because a website was down. And so I was like, okay, I'm not going to message them right now because that's crazy. I'm not messaging them at 11 o'clock their time to get this message. Like this can wait until the morning. So I think that's part of the boundaries too, is it sets the boundaries for everybody, which is like, it's not appropriate to send a message at this time of the day. Okay, well, what final takeaway for people who are experiencing a lot of this like uncertainty and behavioral changes and things like that?
I would say 100% we need to not put all the eggs in one basket. We need multiple clients. I think you shared earlier, and when we were talking earlier, no more than 20% of the revenue. And really that percentage is going to be set on how close you're running to break even. If you've got a good, healthy 20% profit margin, you can afford to lose 20% and still be okay. If you're right on the edge, like you are making exactly the amount that you need to make to survive, then there's other steps you have to take into place. You need to build in a healthier profit margins, and then you need to adjust to make sure that no one client exceeds that safety net. One of the other things strategies that can occur is you can bank it. So you roll enough of a healthy profit from that client that's sucking all of your time and resources, and you stick it in a bank account that says, if this person contracts, I now have a 6-month safety net. I have a 6-month safety net that I can generate more clients in that 6-month period and not lose the business. So there's lots of strategies for how to insulate a company, our businesses, from that type of a situation, and it can be more than just get a bunch of new clients. But the goal here is, no matter what, don't ever be fully pot committed to one client.
Yeah. Or even 50% committed to one client.
Yeah, 100%. But I'm just saying, like, no matter what, if all your attention's going, this is a fat paycheck. I have one client that's making 6 figures from this one client, and she's like, We still have in place that she generates 1 to 2 new clients every month, because she wants that sales process, that purchasing funnel, that pricing structure, that marketing funnel to stay primed. So it's still generating, because if you let it die completely, I don't care if you have 6 months in the bank account, it takes more than 6 months to regenerate a funnel. So
I can't tell you how many people in the last 4 months we've had like, I need new clients right now. We're experiencing all this. And like, that's great. And it's going to take a few months to be able to get the whole process going for regenerating your marketing. You're not going to like turn on the faucet and it's like a fire hose coming at you.
It doesn't. And anybody that thinks they can go on social and just post an offer and all of a sudden all this money is going to come rolling in is not living in the real world, because that's just not how it works.